Yeah, this is our next episode of True Wrestling Fan Discussion to continue our retro pay-per-view review series. It's going to be NWA Starrcade 1983, the Flair for the Gold. I'm your host, Mike.
I'm Frank, and this is going to be probably the oldest pay-per-view we're going to review. It's 40 years old. But if we're going to do the Starrcades, we might as well go back to the beginning.
We're all
Should have did
started.
that last year, but that was last year. Well, this is where it all started, and November 24th, 1983, in Greensboro, North Carolina. You had Bob Caudle and Gordon Soley putting you to sleep on commentary. No, I'm just kidding. They're two legends. They did a really good job commentating this pay-per-view. The only thing that really bugged me during this was the constant interviewing of the
Yeah, it was
same person. Now, if you interview the champion and the challenger, fine, we're done. I think Flair got interviewed 5 times, twice after the match by the same guy.
Before the main event, they had interviews, so I think they were set. They needed to buy time to set up the cage, so they had a stall, and that's why they interviewed a few people right before
because they interviewed Flair in the race during the card, then before the match, and then after the match.
I think they even
got interviewed. Youngblood and Steamboat.
Those guys had like no energy, man. I mean,
Jay Youngblood just looked like he was reading cue cards.
No, but even Steamboat was very like,
before or after the match.
We've wrestled some of the best people, and that was the cadence.
I think that was the one that was the interview after the match.
I didn't think it was the same thing. I don't think there was any difference.
Well, he fought Mr. McMahon. He fought the Briscoes, man. Yeah. You're not gonna have a whole lot of energy fighting them. But let's get into it. Opening match of the card was Rufus R. Jones and Bugsy McGraw versus the Assassins. It was an okay match. I don't know too much about.
I don't know
the Assassins. I know a little bit about. They've been around. The match itself was okay. The crowd was into it.
They started the pay-per-view. The match was already.
Yeah, it was just bam. We're going
boom,
to the action.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm looking at the card and the time limit, and I'm looking on how long the pay-per-view is. I'm like, wait a minute. If you're starting right away, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. This is early on. I think this was on closed circuit TV. I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the production wasn't what it would become. The lighting wasn't that good.
Well, it was for the time.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
WWF ain't doing anything else special.
No, not at this point. No, even look how dimly lit WrestleMania 1 was.
Exactly.
So
as compared to now.
Yeah, the ring was like they had that blue NWA ring that with all the blood all over.
Oh yeah, they sweat blood and tears. They was left all out. Yeah. They didn't clean it up back then.
Yeah.
But the match was okay for an opening match. The Assassins roll up McGraw and get the pin. They get the victory. So on the inaugural Starrcade, the first match, they get the first victory.
Yeah, I think Starrcade was Dusty's idea. I think I'm not mistaken. He had the idea.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And we would see him tonight because he would. And
he doesn't wrestle.
He came on. Yeah, he doesn't wrestle, but he came off as a heel in this.
He kind of went into business for himself.
He did, because he wasn't waiting around. He said, "I'm challenging the winner." He predicted the winner because he was wrong. Yeah. And I'll get into this again later, but he goes right into Flair's locker room, shakes his hand and go, "You 2-time, I'm 2-time. We gonna meet." And I'm like, damn.
It was good though.
Yeah, it was a good promo.
Good.
I'm like,
because Dusty was still babyface here.
On the title, but he came off like heel.
I can see that. I think he actually becomes the booker right after this.
Well, he needed some work.
Well, that's
I know. Next, Tony Schiavone was in the dressing room and this was weird to see these two guys together, Roddy Piper and Ric Flair, and not killing each other.
Isn't it interesting seeing them?
That's what we've seen.
Right. That's the thing.
We haven't really seen them in NWA together.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into that later in the Piper match. But yeah. Being a WWF fan, and looking back at this, even though we know the history, it's just that we weren't watching this. So to see them together, it's interesting.
Not even up east did I mean, I was 5 years old at the time of this pay-per-view, so I wouldn't have known anyway.
Yeah, no, I didn't at this point. I didn't even know what NWA was. I didn't even was it 83?
Yeah.
Well, I don't. My
We
early,
we're lucky we can say NWA. Really, I mean, come on, we're youngsters
yeah,
there.
my earliest memories are Hulk Hogan. Had to have been. It was after Iron Sheik. Those are my like earliest wrestling memories. It was
Yeah,
sometime after,
I think that for all of us, that's that. Yeah.
right around there. Yeah.
Hmm. So our next match on the card was Scott McGhee and Johnny Weaver versus a very young Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah. It's weird seeing he had the long hair.
Yes, it wasn't blonde. It was
Yeah.
just it was brown. It was and he was young. He had
Hmm.
hair
Yeah.
and he was built up a little bit.
Yeah.
And Mark Lewin, who to me was a little odd in the ring, but then again, so was Johnny Weaver. Again, not a bad match to go. The ending, but then again, the endings kind of back then were pretty much simple moves and you get the pin.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like it is today. You need 3 rock bottoms to pin them. In this case, Lewin with a knee drop from the top rope on the arm of Weaver gets him the pin. So this is just how it was back then. And of course, you know, the crowd was booing at this point. After the match, McGee attacked both Sullivan and Lewin to get revenge on the match. However, Gary Hart, who is at ringside for these guys, he had something in his boot. Lewin took it and he kept hitting McGee with it, busting him open completely. There was no blood rule back then for these boys.
Hmm.
And he busted McGee open. Angelo Mosca had come down and he got hit in the arm with the, and I believe that wasn't intentional. He had busted open his arm and he had to get it bandaged up because he would be coming back later on in the evening. He would actually be the special guest referee in the tag team title match. Yeah, I don't think I don't think it was intended for him to get cut open by whatever that
might
was.
have been an accident.
Yeah, but McGee definitely busted open in this one. So, but Sullivan and Lewin get the win in that one. Next up, Barbara Clary, another backstage announcer, interviewed a family sitting ringside. She was asking who was going to win the main event. So, and then of course Tony Schiavone, a young Tony Schiavone, interviewing Harley Race about the upcoming match with Ric Flair.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Harley Race thing. So the story behind is Vince tried to sabotage Starrcade because
no.
Yep.
I was kidding.
He met with Harley Race. He had dinner with him. He offered him a couple $100,000 not to go to Starrcade and to bring the NWA title up to WWF.
Because remember, for back in the late '70s, not to cut you off, they used to have the interpromotional from time to time.
I believe WWF was actually part of NWA. Was underneath that
like an umbrella.
Yeah. I think so. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but I think so. And so he had left. Obviously, they had left at that point. So he was trying to get him up there, and Harley Race eventually he just turned it down because he said, "Listen, I mean, I built these good relationships with people, and you know they've helped me in my career, and I made a lot of money with them. I'm not gonna do that to them." So Vince tried to sabotage. That's why I don't feel bad, but I'm not gonna go off on a tangent, but years later, with the thing that happens with Brett and everything, he was gonna take the belt over there. Vince was trying to pull the same shenanigans in the '80s.
Yes, he was trying. Well, at this point, he's trying to establish
he's trying to get rid of the territories
his mecca conglomerate that he got rid of the territories. He brought in everybody
he's basically
he could think of.
Yeah,
I mean, half of this card at one time or another was there.
Well, I mean, not too long after this, Piper's up there, Valentine's
up there, Steamboat's up there.
Yeah, a few years later, right? Maybe a couple years later.
Yeah,
but eventually, he goes up there. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't feel bad. Don't get me wrong. I don't feel bad for Vince either.
Yeah.
But I just see you brought up the whole Bret Hart thing. I just see the facts laid in front of me, and I look at it as if I'm Vince McMahon, and you're telling me how you're going to leave, and this is my company and that's my belt. Like no, but I don't. I don't want to get into all that.
Vince is a scumbag. All right, moving on.
I never felt bad for Vince McMahon. Let me just clear the record there. I may have defended him. I don't feel bad for him. Everything that he has done, that's been done to him, he probably did it first. And if the idea was done first, he stole it later. So it doesn't matter. So our next match on the card was actually banned in Puerto Rico. So they actually, Jim Crockett bought the contracts so that they could bring the match here to Starrcade, and that was Carlos Colon versus Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
your favorite wrestler?
Not me, you. Carlos Colon for me, Carlito's dad. For some people that didn't know, the very very huge one of the all-time greats in Puerto Rico. Abdullah the Butcher, no, not one of my favorites.
Not so much.
Not so much. Did the Dark Side review on him. That's about it. But what's funny is now Abdullah during the match, he had the spike in his trunks, and he's using it periodically. The referee doesn't see it. Now Carlos takes it out of his trunks, and he's using it. The referee sees it, but doesn't disqualify him. I'm loving this, by the way. We got some referee blunders during this, including in the main event.
In the main event, yeah, definitely,
definitely in the main event. Now Abdullah, I from what I saw, it looked like he accidentally elbow dropped the referee at this point. Now, while the referee was down, Hugo Saminovich comes in. Now I don't feel bad for all the times that they dropped his Spanish announce table during the Attitude Era. Hugo Saminovich comes down, hits Colon in the head with something, and Abdullah gets the pin over Carlos Colon. But a young Hugo, and I guess I should pretty much stop saying a young Hugo Saminovich helping Abdullah the Butcher to beat Carlos Colon on this night. So it wasn't a bad match, but again, not a fan of Abdullah. After this, Tony Schiavone had interviewed Angelo Mosca about what happened earlier on and about the upcoming match that he would be refereeing. So he, at this point, is irate and he's looking for revenge. Our next match on the card was Mark Youngblood and Chief Wahoo McDaniel versus Bob Orton Jr.
This was Slater. So it was supposed to be Hogan and Wahoo McDaniel teaming up. Hogan, even if you look on the early advertisements for Starrcade, it was Hogan. And apparently he was stuck he had a deal with New Japan and couldn't get out of it. There's another rumor that Vince had already signed them to the contract. I believe it, though, because he shows up in WWF a few months later.
2 months later, he's winning the title. Yeah.
So it's possible that he had already
I think that's probably true.
Well, it would have been interesting, because you imagine it would have been interesting. Looking back on it, if Hogan was on this Starrcade, Hogan was on the first Starrcade, was on the first WrestleMania, but it wasn't to be.
Nope, unfortunately, it wasn't. Hey, but however, Roddy Piper was.
Yes.
Roddy Piper did the first Starrcade, and he was main eventing WrestleMania. Yeah,
and
Bob Orton.
I'm sorry, Valentine.
Yes,
Valentine.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he did the first. So we had a couple of guys that were the first time. Sorry, Piper, I was trying to give you that all by yourself, but a few other guys were in there as well. But it is cool to say, they were the first ever to do these, and those are the two biggest. This is NWA/WCW's. To me, their WrestleMania was at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Bob Orton doing the Bob Orton that stuff that he does during this match. They're playing two ends against the middle against the referee, double teaming on Mark Youngblood and Wahoo McDaniel. Bob Orton went off the top rope with a suplex, which, by the way, I love how Gordon Soley called it a suplex. He kept saying that more than once.
Well, maybe that's how you pronounce it.
Probably is. I'm going to go with that. Yes,
it might be
suplex.
Yeah,
it was just weird hearing it, but it
might be a French word. I don't know. I never looked it up. Possible.
No, but Gordon Soley is one of the most informative, knowledgeable commentators of all time. So if he says it, it's got to be true. I mean, this guy is a legend in commentary. His voice will put you to sleep, but he is very informative. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, he was very good. So he did a top rope suplex on Youngblood and gets the pin. After the match, Slater and Orton attacked Wahoo McDaniel and beat him up bad. Later on, you'll see him all bandaged up in Flair's locker room.
He's like half dead, right? Isn't he like half dead in the corner?
Half dead, but he would still make it to Flair's locker room because they said if it wasn't for Wahoo McDaniel, Flair would have not made that match.
Yeah.
against Harley Race. Because remember, Harley paid off the Briscoes to take him out.
Yeah, Flair was so low energy on this pay-per-view. I know he's a babyface here, but
I know
his
right?
energy was just so sedated. He was just like,
he's not doing the styling, the profile.
He was still the I'm pretty sure he was still because he had the robe and everything. This time he still was a nature boy.
Just very young.
But I think for this pay-per-view, for whatever reason, they chose.
Maybe he waited until he was like 5-time champion before he started all that. Because remember, now he's only 2-time.
Yeah.
2-time at this point. So he's young. He's inexperienced as the champion. He's not the 16 yet. We still got a lot to go.
This guy was like 8-time already, though, right?
Harley 7-time champion. Yes,
7, yeah.
Well, his career was winding down. You could tell in that match, and then not too long after that, remember he went and signed with WWF, and they didn't really do anything with him because again his career was coming to an end. He was the king, yeah. But I mean, you're talking about a 7-time NWA champion. What's his claim to fame in WWF besides the king? Facing Hulk Hogan? That's about it. So after the match, Tony Schiavone interviewed Ric Flair as well as Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat. This was one of the interviews where he was saying that Jay just had no energy.
No.
It's like he was reading the cue cards or something.
But I don't know. It's also interesting to see, like, Steamboat and Flair, they're friends and everything, and then knowing the feuds that they have later on.
6 years later, what comes down. Yeah. We did this. We talked about that on Survivor Series '87 when Savage had Jake Roberts and Duggan and Steamboat as his partners, and I'm like, okay, had a feud, will have a feud, huge feud. Mm-hmm. You just happen to do that when you go looking in the past. But yeah, Steamboat and Youngblood are in Flair's corner as well as Wahoo McDaniel up against Harley Race and his little faction there. The next match on the card, and I really got a kick out of this guy. I became an instant fan of this dude because he is just the most energetic, entertaining man of the night. It was for the NWA television title. It was title versus mask. It was the Great Kabuki defending the title against Downtown Charlie Brown. Mm-hmm. And it's not Kabuki that has the mask. It's Charlie Brown. And this is like he looks like an old timer, but could still go. I'm telling you, I remember one of the women they got interviewed during this. She said, "Who's your favorite wrestler?" One woman said Ric Flair, naturally. Another woman said Charlie Brown, and I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting." Until I saw his match, and I became a fan of the way he was in the ring, the way the crowd was with him, just everything. This was one of my favorite matches during this. This actually woke me up, unfortunately, but this was a pretty good match. Kabuki missed a dropkick in the corner, kind of hit his head on the canvas, and Brown went just with an elbow drop. Again, back then, stuff like this. Got you the win. Elbow drop and the pin, and Charlie Brown became the new television champion in the NWA. Interesting fact about this is that Charlie Brown is actually Jimmy Valiant, who storyline-wise, what was it? He got
banned him or something.
Banned him from wrestling, so he came up. He
created it was him, too.
with the beard, but I love this gimmick that he came up with. Like I said, I was an instant fan. So Downtown Charlie Brown is Jimmy Valiant. So this worked for him. It didn't work for Hogan with Mr. America when he was banned. But definitely a fan of all his antics in the ring. It was definitely good to see. Now the next segment they did, Tony Schiavone, he interviewed Bob Orton and Dick Slater. And Harley Race was there as well about the whole thing with Ric Flair. Plus, Barbara Clary interviewed Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah,
challenge. He did because this is the second time they tried to interview him. The first time the microphone didn't work. This is where he issued the challenge to the winner, and he said that he believed the winner was going to be Harley Race.
And Harley Race, I think, put a bounty on Flair. He knows the
yes,
story.
He did. Yeah, and the Briscoes tried to take him out.
Yeah. Didn't Triple H put a bounty on? It was Goldberg, right? He put a bounty on Goldberg.
Yeah.
Years later. Yeah.
You're always going to see that.
Yeah,
we've probably forgotten about 4 or 5 different other bounty storylines that they had. So our next match on the card was also one of my favorites because they're 2 WWF guys as well. It was a dog collar match, and for the whole match, with the exception of finally at the ending when I guess they told Gordon Solie it wasn't, he believed that this was for the United States Championship, and it wasn't. It was a non-title match. Piper did not get the rematch for losing the title to Valentine. Valentine was the U.S. champion. Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine in a dog collar match. And you talk about, oh my God, how excruciating this match was. How in the beginning they're using their neck muscles against each other. They were battered, bruised, bled all over the place. It was cool how Piper manipulated the chain to where he used it in his favor to pin Valentine and get the victory here. Unfortunately, you win the battle, you lose the war because Valentine afterwards gave him another beatdown. Also tried to re-injure his ear.
There was a lot of that, I think. Post match beatdowns. Yeah. Post match beatdowns. I think he actually legitimately lost some hearing as a result of this feud. I think
he was bleeding from his ear.
Yeah, I think he actually did have some hearing problems going forward, like in real life.
Yeah, but they had used the storyline that prior to this, Valentine busted his ear and he, had lost his hearing, and Piper came back, with vengeance to go up against him. And it was at the end of this match that Gordon Solie said, "My apologies, this was a non-title match." And I'm like, what gave it away? The fact that Piper's not holding the belt up? Yeah. I mean, I would have put the belt up on the line in a rematch for this, with this stipulation. Why not? I mean, Valentine cheated his way to winning the title. Piper wants it back. And in an interview later, he says, "I got a piece of you now. Now I'm coming for my belt." And it's just weird talking about being a champion with him because the only time we ever saw it in WWF was the Intercontinental Championship. Other than that, there was never a title put on him. But we have said this in the past.
Valentine won the IC title at least.
Right? And the tag titles, yeah. It's interesting to say about Piper. Piper is one of those rare guys that doesn't need a title to define him in the ring. What he leaves out there, says it, that he's the absolute best. Doesn't need the belt to prove it. Would have been nice, though. So, following this, once again, and this is what I'm talking about, the excessive interviews, Tony Schiavone once again interviewing Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, at ringside, Barbara Clary is interviewing Don Kernoodle, who teams with Sergeant Slaughter. He's in the tag team division. He's there watching this upcoming tag title match. The next match on the card for the NWA Tag Team Championship, the Briscoe brothers, Jack and Jerry, with the body shop and giving Mr. McMahon coffee. I'm sorry, every time I see him, that's
funny seeing them here. Yeah,
yeah, young and in good shape. Yeah, they were good wrestlers. They're defending the titles against they were four-time at this point, four-time tag team champions, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood.
I think they leave as like 8
at this point. Oh, when it's all said and done, yeah. You think that would be unheard of back in the day.
Yeah, I didn't realize they swapped titles that much.
In NWA, it was a lot, yeah. Hell, in WWE, if you got it a 3-time, you were all-time greats back then.
At that point, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now
it doesn't matter. Now it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. You can win it 11 different times with 11 different guys.
That's the thing. You don't even have to be a tag team anymore. You just team up with somebody for one night. Yeah.
That's the only thing I don't like. Yeah, you can put these two guys together and all of a sudden
meaningless.
They win the belts.
It's meaningless, but yeah.
It is, but back then tag team wrestling actually meant something. And in NWA, they always pride themselves on tag team wrestling, which is why there's a lot of tag teams on this card. Yes, definitely. And Steamboat and Youngblood were a very good tag team. Briscoes were too. There's not. I haven't seen much of them. Video on them.
I tell you. I've read that they were good.
Yeah, and of course, you can see them on this one. Doing their the shenanigans. They are the heels going into the match, obviously. A double team splash by Youngblood got the pin, and if you blinked, you would have missed it because you almost didn't even realize that the referee counted the 3.
Right. It happened kind of like it was abruptly. It was weird.
Yeah, and Jerry Briscoe was the one pinned. Afterwards, the Briscoes attacked Mosca, who's the special guest
with
referee
the
at this point.
Post beatdowns.
Starrcade is supposed to be the build-up, and the storylines end here, and these guys are only starting them. It's like, no, we're not ending this here. We're going after you. We don't care. So they beat down Mosca, Youngblood, Steamboat. They took them all out until they finally fought back and cleared the ring. Mosca at this point had enough. He's like, I'm done getting my butt kicked during this night, and I'm not even wrestling. So trust me,
he looked like he's still wrestling.
He was still wrestling, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, trust me, these guys are better off that King Kong Angelo Mosca did not get in the ring this night. He was one of the all-time greats too. And again, not a lot of footage on him, but if anybody happened to go to a house show and see him wrestle back then, you were in for a treat. So, and of course, after this, Tony, interviewed downtown Charlie Brown, which again was a sight to see. Old Jimmy Valance, with the shenanigans. But hey, the gimmick's working, and he's NWA television champion. Then he interviewed Roddy Piper. This is where they had to get set up the cage and whatnot. So, and this is where Roddy Piper said, I got my revenge. Now I'm coming for my belt. And then he interviewed Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat, but Jay Youngblood just with the honored, we're the 5-time tag team champions. I was waiting for him to say, what's that word say? Yeah. Oh, okay. Steamboat at this point, too, was a little lackluster.
He was.
They fought almost a 15-minute fight here, and they fought hard against the Briscoes. So, if he wasn't saying much, there's the reason. But Jay, man, just porch lights on. Nobody's home with this guy, but he can wrestle. So now on to our main event, steel cage match for the NWA title. Special guest referee Gene Kiniski. Harley Race defending the title against Ric Flair. 7-time champ against a former champion, Ric Flair. Man, I'll tell you what, this has got to be one of my favorite Ric Flair matches of all time.
Yeah, it was a fun match.
This was a great match between the two. Busted each other open. Now they did stipulate there was no disqualification. They did say that, right? I didn't hear things.
I think so. I think they did say it.
Okay. Why is Gene Kiniski admonishing these guys?
He was getting involved, yeah.
When anything goes.
I don't know.
I don't understand. If they want to hide a brass knuckles and use it, they can use it.
Yeah, I don't know. He was getting a little too involved. He was getting a little too involved in it. I think he grabs, doesn't he? Grab Race? Actually, I think he physically grabs.
Race was getting agitated. They had history, those two, for the title.
Right.
So the little animosity still between the two of them there. That's kind of like with Andre and Big John Studd later on. They don't like each other. They had a rivalry. Something here like that too. And it was really pissing Harley Race off during this. But he kept his head in the game against Flair. And this was a good 24-minute fight between these two. Busted all open, left it all out there. Now, the referee had went down after Harley Race headbutted him. It looked like an accident. Hey, based on what we saw during the night, maybe it wasn't. But Ric Flair doing a crossbody drop off the top rope is what I went, what the?
He was young.
We never see.
But then Harley Race is like an awkward fall. It was like a
it did, and it's almost like how did he get the 3 on that with that fall?
It was like
but no figure 4 here. Crossbody drop gets the pin. Ric Flair is now the 2-time NWA champion.
His hair is bright red.
Oh man, always. Then you had a good Ric Flair match if his hair is all crimson red.
Right. So he wins. Then this thing just drags out though.
Now at this point, I had paused it, and it said it was like
20 minutes left, right?
It was at 2 hours 38 minutes, and the pay-per-view time itself was 2 hours 57 minutes.
Right. Yeah,
so I'm like, okay, is there an impromptu match I don't know about? Are we cashing in something? What are we doing here? No. Tony Schiavone is going to interview Ric Flair after the match in the locker room. Then that's when Dusty came back there, shook his hand, kind of came a little heelish, but he's there for business. And he said, down the road, it's me and you. And, of course, the next 2 Starrcade main events will be these 2 guys locking up. Then Barbara Clary interviewed Harley Race. Yeah, and he said, this is not the end of me. There will be an 8th time. Unfortunately, there wasn't. I'm sorry. But he would, he wasn't going to retire. He was going to continue on to get his title back. And then again, Tony Schiavone's interviewing Ric Flair, Jay Youngblood, and Ricky Steamboat, and I'm like, what are we doing here? By this point, it's overkill with the interview. At least interview somebody else.
It must have been that they finished the matches too quickly, and they still had time that they paid for.
Yeah.
And they were like, we got to just, I guess, I'm assuming, I don't know.
It sounds like that because otherwise they would have just said, have a good day.
All right, yeah. See you.
And they kept going back to Bob Caudle and Gordon Soley. And
it's like a post-game show. It's like the
post-game. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe that was supposed to be. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. It could be. I don't know. We weren't watching back then.
Maybe back then this is what they did. I wasn't really watching back then. If anybody that's watching this that's familiar with Starrcade 83 and the NWA back then, feel free to comment and let us know. Because That you're right. It could have been that.
Yeah, it could have just been their style back then. But it was entertaining. It started kind of slow, but then it picked up.
It did, especially when you had the special stipulation matches, and when you got to the title matches, especially then, it was very entertaining. Main event was great.
Yeah, absolutely, no question.
And we don't say that about too many Starrcade main events.
Not really. All right, well, at least going forward, yeah. I mean,
exactly.
All right, well, that's our review. Please like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys soon.
Take care.